Montana Territory, 1879. The first snowfall of winter dusted the peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains as Charlotte James stepped off the train in Silver Creek, clutching nothing but a carpet bag and the letter that had brought her west. The journey from Boston had emptied her purse and nearly broken her spirit, but the promise of a teaching position and escape from the whispers that followed her in Massachusetts had propelled her forward. The platform was nearly deserted, save for a young man leaning against a hitching post. He straightened as she descended the steps, revealing himself to be tall and broad-shouldered, with wheat gold hair that caught the afternoon sun. His face was clean-shaven but weathered from outdoor life, and though he couldn't have been more than 25, his blue eyes held a depth that suggested he'd seen more of life than most men twice his age. "Miss James," he called, approaching with an easy gait. "I'm Vincent Fletcher. The school board sent me to collect you." Charlotte nodded, suddenly conscious of her travel-worn appearance. She smoothed her navy traveling dress, wishing she'd had time to fix her chestnut hair, which had mostly escaped its pins during the bumpy final leg of her journey. "Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. I wasn't expecting an escort." "Call me Vince," he said, taking her bag. "Nobody stands on ceremony much out here. Besides, it's 4 miles to town proper, and the temperature's dropping faster than a stone in a well." He led her to a wagon where 2 chestnut horses stomped impatiently. As he helped her up to the seat, Charlotte noticed calluses on his hands that spoke of hard work, yet there was a gentleness in his touch that surprised her. "You've come a long way," he commented as they pulled away from the station. "Boston, right? What brings a city lady all the way to Montana Territory?" Charlotte chose her words carefully. "The opportunity. I understand Silver Creek is growing, and with growth comes the need for education." Vince chuckled. "That's the official answer. But most folks don't cross half a continent unless they're running towards something mighty fine or away from something mighty troubling." His perceptiveness unsettled her. "Perhaps I simply wanted adventure." "Fair enough," he said, a smile playing at his lips. "Silver Creek's got plenty of that to spare." As they crested a hill, the town came into view, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley, smoke curling from chimneys against the backdrop of mountains. It wasn't much compared to Boston, but to Charlotte, it represented what she needed most, a fresh start. "That building there with the bell tower, that'll be your school," Vince pointed. 22 students, ages 6 to 16. Some ride in from ranches 10 miles out. "And where will I be staying?" "Mrs. Peterson runs the boarding house. Strict as they come, but fair. No gentlemen callers past 8, and absolutely no spirits on the premises." Charlotte smiled despite herself. "I assure you, Mr. Fletcher, I have no intention of entertaining gentlemen callers or imbibing spirits." "Vince," he corrected again, then added with a wink. "And that's a shame about the gentlemen callers. Some of us might have had hopes." Before Charlotte could formulate a proper response, she noticed something odd in the back of the wagon, several small, wooden carved animals. "Are you a toy maker, Mr. Fletcher?" she asked, picking up a delicately crafted horse. His expression shifted, something indefinable passing across his features. "No, ma'am. Just something I do for the kids during the long winters." The kids. But Vince had already turned his attention to guiding the horses down the steep hill into town, leaving Charlotte wondering what else this young cowboy might be besides her welcoming committee. Charlotte's first week of teaching passed in a blur of names, lessons, and adjustments to frontier life. The schoolhouse was smaller than she was accustomed to, but well-built, with a pot-bellied stove that kept the worst of the cold at bay. Her students, though lacking the polished manners of Boston children, possessed an eagerness to learn that made her heart swell. On Friday afternoon, as she dismissed her class, the door opened to reveal Vince Fletcher, hat in hand. Several of the children ran to him with excited cries. "Mr. Vince, did you bring it? Did you finish?" From his pocket, he produced a tiny carved rabbit, presenting it to a small girl with braids. "For your collection, Miss Abigail, as promised." The child's delight was palpable as she cradled the wooden creature. After the children dispersed, Vince approached Charlotte's desk. "Miss James," he said with a nod, "I hope your first week has been agreeable." "Very much so, though I'm still learning everyone's stories." She gestured to the departing children. "They seem quite fond of you. We look out for each other in Silver Creek." He shifted his weight, seeming almost nervous. "I actually came by to ask if you'd join me for supper tomorrow." The hotel restaurant serves a decent steak, and you might appreciate a meal you don't have to share with 12 other boarding house residents. Charlotte hesitated. In Boston, accepting such an invitation would have implications, expectations. But this wasn't Boston, and the loneliness of the past week pressed against her resolve. That would be lovely, Mr. Fletcher. Vince, he corrected for the third time, his smile warming his entire face. I'll call for you at 6. As he turned to leave, Charlotte called after him. You never did explain about the carvings. He paused at the door. Tomorrow, Miss James. Some stories are better told over supper. The next evening, Charlotte dressed with care in her best dress, a deep green wool that brought out the amber flecks in her eyes. Mrs. Peterson raised an eyebrow as Charlotte descended the stairs, but said nothing as Vince arrived promptly at 6, wearing a pressed shirt and vest that transformed him from rugged cowboy to handsome gentleman. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Silver Creek, which wasn't saying much by Boston standards. Still, the tablecloths were clean, the silverware polished, and the atmosphere far more private than the boarding house dining room. You clean up nicely, Miss James, Vince said after they were seated. As do you, Mr. Fletcher. You're quite the mystery in town. Some say you're a rancher, others say you work for the sawmill. I do a bit of both, and whatever else pays. A man needs to be versatile out here. He paused as their food arrived. But you didn't come to dinner to hear about my odd jobs. Actually, I did. You promised to explain about the carvings. Vince's eyes clouded briefly. It started 4 years ago. I was 19, fresh off my parents' homestead, and looking to make my own way. Took a job with the Sullivan outfit, 15 miles north of here. He cut his steak, seeming to choose his words with care. Second week there, a blizzard hit. Worst in living memory. The foreman's wife had just had twins, and their cabin caught fire in the night. We got everyone out, but they lost everything. Charlotte leaned forward, caught by the quiet intensity in his voice. Those babies didn't have so much as a rattle to their name. So I took my knife to some pine scraps and made them each a little horse. Nothing fancy, just something to hold. His expression softened. You should have seen their little faces when they were old enough to play with them. After that, well, word got around. So you make toys for all the children? Not all. Just those who need something special now and then. He shrugged, almost embarrassed. Everyone thinks I'm doing it for the kids, but truth is, there's something peaceful about sitting by the fire, turning wood into something that brings joy. Charlotte studied him with new eyes. This young cowboy with his rough hands and gentle heart was unlike any man she'd met in Boston's drawing rooms. Now it's your turn, Vince said, changing the subject. What really brought you to Silver Creek? And don't say adventure. I've seen how you flinch when anyone asks about Boston. The directness of his question caught her off guard. She considered deflecting, but found herself wanting to match his honesty. I was engaged, she said quietly, to a prominent doctor's son. The wedding was planned for spring, until... She took a breath. Until I became ill with scarlet fever. I recovered, but there were complications. The doctor said I would never bear children. She stared at her plate, unable to meet his eyes. My fiancé's family called off the engagement. Quietly, of course, but everyone knew why. A barren wife is no wife at all for a man expecting to build a dynasty. When she finally looked up, expecting pity or discomfort, she found only steady understanding in Vince's blue eyes. His loss, he said simply. Seems to me a man ought to know what truly matters. The conversation turned to lighter topics after that, but something had shifted between them. As they walked back to the boarding house under a sky brilliant with stars, Charlotte felt a lightness she hadn't experienced since before her illness. At the boarding house steps, Vince took her hand. I'd like to call on you again, Miss James. Charlotte, she corrected with a smile. And yes, I'd like that very much. What neither of them noticed was the figure watching from across the street, a man whose interest in the new schoolteacher went beyond mere curiosity. Over the next 3 months, Charlotte fell into the rhythm of Silver Creek life. Her students progressed in their studies, the townspeople accepted her as one of their own, and her friendship with Vince Fletcher deepened into something she dared not name. Their Sunday afternoon rides became a fixture of her week. Vince would arrive after church with 2 horses, and they would explore the countryside, talking about everything and nothing. He showed her hidden valleys where wildflowers would bloom in spring and mountain vistas that stole her breath. On a crisp December afternoon, They rode to a frozen creek where pine trees stood sentinel against the white landscape. Vince helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist. "I have something to show you," he said, leading her through the trees to a small cabin nestled in a clearing. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the windows glowed with warm light. "Whose home is this?" Charlotte asked. "Mine. Or it will be, once it's finished. Been working on it since summer." He led her inside, where a fire crackled in a stone hearth. The interior was simple but crafted with evident care: smooth plank floors, tight-fitting logs, and windows that caught the winter light. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "It's not much yet. Still needs furniture, curtains, a woman's touch." His eyes met hers meaningfully. "I've been saving for years, putting aside enough to start my own small ranch. This spring I'll have a herd of 30 cattle to my name." Charlotte's heart quickened. This was no idle conversation. He was telling her his plans, his dreams. Dreams that, perhaps, might include her. "You've accomplished so much, and you're so young," she said. 23 next month." He moved closer. "Old enough to know what I want." Before he could continue, a child's voice called from outside. "Mr. Vince. Mr. Vince." They stepped onto the porch to find a boy of about 10, red-faced and panting. "It's Ma," the boy gasped. "The baby's coming," and paws away in Butte. "Dr. Miller says he needs help." Vince was already moving. "Take my horse, Charlotte. Follow the trail back to town. I'll go with Tommy." Without waiting for her response, he lifted the boy onto one horse and mounted the other, disappearing down the path with a thunder of hooves. Charlotte rode back to town slowly, her mind spinning with what had almost happened at the cabin. Had Vince been about to declare himself? And if he had, what would she have said? The question haunted her as she returned to the boarding house. 2 days passed with no word from Vince. On the third morning, as Charlotte was beginning lessons, the classroom door opened to reveal him, looking exhausted but triumphant. "Forgive the interruption, Miss James," he said formally, aware of the children's curious eyes. "I wanted to let Tommy know his mother and new sister are doing fine." A cheer went up from the students. Tommy, who had been staring anxiously at his slate, broke into a smile of pure relief. "Thank you, Mr. Fletcher," Charlotte said. "Perhaps you could tell the class about your night?" For the next 20 minutes, Vince described how he'd helped deliver the Anderson baby, heating water, fetching supplies, and ultimately holding Mrs. Anderson's hand through the long night until her daughter arrived at dawn. The children listened in rapt attention to the sanitized version of events. "Will you make a carving for the new baby?" asked little Abigail. "Already have," Vince answered, producing a tiny wooden cradle from his pocket. Her very first toy. As the children crowded around to see, Charlotte watched Vince. His gentle manner with the children, the tired lines around his eyes, the quiet competence that had likely saved 2 lives. Something in her chest ached with a yearning she'd thought forever lost. After class, Vince waited while she gathered her things. "I'm sorry about Sunday," he said. "I had plans for our afternoon. You were needed elsewhere. It's clear the people here depend on you." He stepped closer. "What I wanted to say, before Tommy arrived, was that I'm building that cabin for a family, Charlotte. My family. I know we haven't known each other long by Eastern standards, but out here," the schoolhouse door burst open, admitting the chairman of the school board, Mr. Thornton, along with a well-dressed stranger. Miss James," Thornton said. "Allow me to introduce Mr. Edward Blackwell from Boston. He claims to know you." Charlotte's blood froze as she looked into the face of her former fiancé's closest friend, the man who had delivered the news of her broken engagement with barely concealed satisfaction. "Charlotte," Edward said smoothly, "what a fortunate coincidence to find you here. I'm surveying investment opportunities for the railroad." "Mr. Blackwell," she acknowledged stiffly. Vince sensed her discomfort. "Miss James and I were just discussing school business, gentlemen. Perhaps another time would be better for social calls." Edward's eyes flicked dismissively over Vince's worn clothing. "I'm sure a cowhand's business can wait. I've traveled quite far to reconnect with an old family friend." The undercurrent of tension was palpable. Thornton, oblivious, beamed at what he perceived as an important connection for their small town. "Mr. Blackwell has graciously offered to escort Miss James to the Founder's Day dance this Saturday. Quite an honor, having a Boston gentleman among us." Charlotte opened her mouth to refuse, but Edward spoke first. "I insist, Charlotte. We have so much to discuss from home." His emphasis on the last word carried a clear threat. He knew her secrets, her shame, and could expose them here in her new haven. I would be delighted, she lied, avoiding Vince's gaze. After the men departed, Vince remained motionless by her desk. Friend of yours? Hardly, Charlotte whispered. But he has the power to destroy everything I've built here. What does he have over you? The truth. She gathered her courage. The complete truth about my illness, my broken engagement. If the school board knew. Vince's jaw tightened. You think they'd dismiss you for something beyond your control? Small towns run on reputations, Vince. You know that. Parents might not want their children taught by a woman deemed defective. The word hung between them, ugly and raw. You're not defective, he said fiercely. And if that's what they think in Boston, then Boston's not worth the ground it's built on. His defense warmed her, but the reality remained. Nevertheless, I must speak with Mr. Blackwell. Find out what he wants. Be careful, Vince warned. Men like that always want something. As he left, Charlotte sank into her chair, the half-finished declaration of Vince's intentions now overshadowed by the specter of her past. Whatever Edward Blackwell wanted, it wouldn't be something she was willing to give. The Founders' Day dance transformed the town hall into a festive wonderland of evergreen boughs and paper decorations. Charlotte wore her best dress, a burgundy taffeta that rustled when she moved, and allowed Mrs. Peterson to arrange her hair in an elaborate style worthy of Boston's finest parlors. Edward called for her in a rented carriage, looking every inch the successful Easterner in his tailored suit. As they rode to the dance, he wasted no time in revealing his purpose. You've made quite a life for yourself here, Charlotte. Teaching, respected, even a cowboy suitor. His tone made the last sound like a joke. The Harrington family was most distressed when you disappeared. Charlotte stiffened. I didn't disappear. I resigned my teaching position and left. There was nothing to keep me in Boston after James broke our engagement. Yes, that unfortunate business. Edward clicked his tongue. A woman unable to fulfill her primary purpose. Most tragic. His cruelty stung, but Charlotte refused to show it. What do you want, Edward? Simply to deliver a message. James is to marry Eliza Winthrop next month. His family would prefer if your condition remained private. Small towns do gossip so, and word does travel back east eventually. I have no intention of discussing my personal matters with anyone here. Excellent. Edward's smile didn't reach his eyes. And in return for your discretion, the Harrington family is prepared to be generous. A small stipend, perhaps? Life must be difficult on a teacher's salary. Charlotte nearly laughed. They're bribing me for my silence about a matter I have no desire to discuss? How considerate. I prefer to think of it as compensation for your inconvenience. After all, you did travel quite far to escape the whispers. As they arrived at the town hall, Edward placed a hand on her arm. One more thing. This cowboy of yours, Fletcher, is it? Does he know you can never give him children? Or have you allowed him to believe there might be a future for you two? The question struck her like a physical blow. In truth, she and Vince had never discussed children, and the thought of disappointing him in this most fundamental way had haunted her growing feelings. My relationship with Mr. Fletcher is none of your concern, she said coldly. Perhaps not. But honesty is the foundation of any relationship, wouldn't you agree? It would be a shame if he learned of your condition from someone other than yourself. The threat hung in the air as he escorted her into the dance, where the townspeople of Silver Creek had gathered in their finest clothes. The local band played a lively reel, and couples spun across the floor in a whirl of color and movement. Charlotte spotted Vince immediately. He stood against the far wall, devastatingly handsome in a new shirt and vest, his golden hair combed back from his forehead. When their eyes met, her heart stumbled in its rhythm. Edward, following her gaze, chuckled. Ah, young love, so tragically misplaced in your case. Before Charlotte could respond, they were approached by Mr. Thornton and several school board members, eager to speak with the sophisticated visitor from Boston. Edward slipped effortlessly into the role of important investor, discussing railroad opportunities and Eastern connections. Charlotte took the opportunity to slip away, making her way toward Vince. Before she could reach him, however, a small figure barreled into her skirts. Miss James. 6-year-old Sarah Peterson clutched at her dress. You have to come quick. Lucy's crying in the cloakroom and won't come out. Charlotte allowed herself to be pulled toward the back of the hall, where she found 10-year-old Lucy Anderson, Tommy's sister and the daughter of the woman Vince had helped, sobbing behind the coats. "Lucy, darling, what's wrong?" Charlotte knelt beside the girl. "I heard that man talking," Lucy hiccuped. "He said awful things about Mr. Vince." Charlotte's blood chilled. "What man? What did he say?" "The fancy man from the city. He told Mr. Thornton that Mr. Vince is a—" The girl lowered her voice to repeat a slur so vile Charlotte gasped. "He said Mr. Vince only pretends to help people so he can take advantage," Lucy continued, her young face troubled by words she clearly didn't fully understand, "and that nobody should let their children near him." Fury rose in Charlotte like a tide. Edward was deliberately undermining Vince's reputation, but why? What possible reason could he have to target a man he'd just met? "Lucy, listen to me. That man is wrong, and what he said is a terrible lie. Mr. Fletcher is one of the finest men I know." After comforting the child and sending her back to the dance with Sarah, Charlotte searched the hall for Edward. She found him still surrounded by town elders, spinning tales of Eastern prosperity. Vince was nowhere to be seen. She interrupted the group without apology. "Mr. Blackwell, might I have a word?" Edward excused himself smoothly. "Of course, my dear." Once they were relatively private, Charlotte unleashed her anger in a fierce whisper. "How dare you spread lies about Vincent Fletcher? What possible reason could you have to malign a man you don't even know?" Edward's pleasant mask slipped, revealing something cold beneath. "I'm merely looking out for your interests, Charlotte. A man like that, uneducated, uncultured, is hardly suitable company for a Boston-bred lady, even one with your limitations." "My interests? Or the Harringtons? What are you really doing here, Edward?" A calculating look crossed his face. "James regrets his hasty decision. The Winthrop girl is wealthy, but lacks your refinement. He sent me to assess your situation." Charlotte stepped back, stunned. "You're saying he wants me back? After everything? Your condition needn't be an impediment. Adoption is always possible for the childless, and the Harrington name must continue somehow. Of course, you would need to return to Boston immediately before the Winthrop engagement is formally announced." The audacity of the proposal left Charlotte speechless. That James would discard her, then attempt to reclaim her when a better prospect proved less appealing, was insulting beyond measure. "You can tell James that I would rather spend my life alone than return to a man who valued me only for what my body could provide him," she said, each word precise as a bullet. Edward's expression hardened. "Don't be foolish. What future do you have here? Teaching other people's children until you grow old? Or becoming the barren wife of a penniless cowboy? That penniless cowboy has more honor and decency than James Harrington could ever hope to possess." Charlotte straightened to her full height. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I believe I promised this dance to someone else." She turned to leave, but Edward grabbed her wrist. "This isn't over, Charlotte. One word from me about your condition, and your pristine reputation in this backwater will be finished." "Let her go." Vince's voice, low and dangerous, came from behind Edward. Edward turned, maintaining his grip on Charlotte's wrist. "This is a private conversation, Cowboy." "Not anymore." Vince stepped closer. "I won't ask again." Something in his tone made Edward release Charlotte. "Ah, the gallant defender. Has she told you yet? About why she really left Boston? About what she can never give you?" Charlotte's heart raced. "Vince, please, I know everything I need to know about Charlotte." Vince interrupted, his eyes never leaving Edward's face. "Unlike some, I value her for who she is, not what she can provide." A crowd was gathering, drawn by the tension. Edward, sensing an audience, raised his voice. "Do you know she's barren, Fletcher? That she can never bear children? That her fiancé cast her aside when he learned the truth?" A collective gasp went up from the onlookers. Charlotte closed her eyes, feeling her carefully constructed new life crumbling around her. When she opened them again, she was surprised to see not horror on Vince's face, but a calm determination. "Is that true, Charlotte?" he asked gently. "You can't have children?" With the eyes of half the town upon her, Charlotte found she could only nod, tears threatening to spill. And then Vincent Fletcher did the most unexpected thing. He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached his eyes and crinkled the corners. "Good," he said clearly, taking her hand. "I've got enough kids for both of us." Confused murmurs ran through the crowd. Edward scoffed. What nonsense is this? Vince turned to address the townspeople. Most of you know I grew up on the Sullivan Ranch. What you might not know is that when my parents died in that influenza outbreak 6 years ago, the Sullivans took me in. Not as a hand, but as family. They had 5 children of their own, but room in their hearts for one more. He squeezed Charlotte's hand. When that blizzard took their home 4 years back, it was my turn to help. I've been working 2 jobs since then, ranching by day, sawmill by night, putting aside money for my own place while helping them rebuild. Those 5 kids, they're like my brothers and sisters, and every child in Silver Creek that needs something, a toy, a helping hand, someone to talk to, they're my family too. He looked at Charlotte, his blue eyes filled with emotion. I don't need children of my own blood to have a family. I've learned that love isn't about bloodlines. It's about who you choose. In the silence that followed, Mrs. Anderson stepped forward, her newborn daughter in her arms. Mr. Fletcher saved my life and my baby's when he helped the doctor last week. Any woman would be blessed to have such a man, whether she can bear children or not. One by one, others stepped forward with stories. How Vince had taught their son to fish, repaired a roof for an elderly widow, carved special toys for each child in town. Edward, seeing the tide of public opinion turning against him, sneered. How charming. A frontier fairy tale. But Charlotte belongs in Boston, among her own kind. I believe, said Mr. Thornton, stepping forward, that Miss James is perfectly capable of deciding where she belongs. And judging by what we've seen, she belongs right here in Silver Creek. Charlotte looked up at Vince, hardly daring to believe what was happening. You knew, didn't you? About my condition. You overheard us talking that day in the schoolhouse. Vince nodded. I heard enough. Was waiting for you to tell me yourself, when you were ready. And it truly doesn't matter to you. Only if it matters to you. He brushed a tear from her cheek. Charlotte, I've been building that cabin for you. For us. I may not have much, but everything I am is yours if you want it. In front of the entire town, Charlotte James rose on tiptoes and pressed her lips to Vincent Fletcher's in a kiss that needed no words to explain. Edward Blackwell departed Silver Creek the next morning, his business unfinished, his threats rendered powerless by a community that had chosen to embrace one of their own, imperfections and all. Spring came to Montana with a riot of wildflowers and new beginnings. The schoolhouse was packed with every resident of Silver Creek and surrounding homesteads as Charlotte James, in a simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair, pledged her life to Vincent Fletcher. The cabin by the creek was ready for its new mistress, furnished with simple pieces Vince had built through the winter, and brightened by curtains and quilts gifted by the townswomen. On their wedding night, as they stood on the porch watching stars appear above the mountains, Charlotte leaned into her husband's embrace. Any regrets? Vince asked, his arms tightening around her. Only that we didn't meet sooner, she replied. I wasted so much time being ashamed of something I couldn't change. Nothing to be ashamed of, he murmured against her hair. Besides, I meant what I said at that dance. I've got enough kids for both of us. As if to prove his point, the next day brought visitors. All 5 Sullivan children, plus half a dozen of Charlotte's students, bearing food and small gifts for the newlyweds. They came often after that, for lessons and stories, for Vince's wooden toys and Charlotte's cookies. The cabin became a gathering place for children who needed extra attention, a safe haven where they could find understanding and acceptance. In time, Charlotte and Vince did indeed build a family, not through birth, but through love. They became guardians to Tommy and Lucy Anderson when their parents were taken by typhoid. Later, they welcomed 3 orphaned siblings whose wagon had broken down outside Silver Creek, their parents succumbing to winter's harsh grip before help could arrive. And on quiet evenings, when their home was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, Charlotte would catch Vince's eye across the room and see in his smile the truth he had known all along. That family was not defined by blood, but by the heart's capacity to love. In giving up her dream of bearing children, Charlotte James Fletcher had found something far greater, a man who saw not what she lacked, but all that she had to give, and children who needed not a birth mother, but simply a mother's love. In Silver Creek, she had found enough love for both of them, and more to spare.